Continuing our reading in No Frills Science Fiction. Today is Chapter 4. Alex! Alex, where are you? A moment ago, Dana had held his hand, but where Alex should be, there was nothing. Missing or not, however, Alex was clearly agitated. Impossibly, sounds were issuing out of the void, words that would make a less experienced police officer blush, and not prettily. Whatever had happened to Alex, it hadn't affected his vocal cords. Gingerly, Dana took a step forward, and then another. "Alex!" she screeched, and suddenly she fell, hurtling through space. If her numb senses could be believed, she was falling up. With a painful crash, she landed, a pile of arms, legs, and space gear. After a long moment, she began to take stock. Legs first. They seemed all right. But dazed, she took count again. There seemed to be too many of them. She began patting the floor, then froze. A floor? Legs? Alex? Alex, do you hear me? Wake up! She demanded. Her voice echoed hollowly through the room. Shouldn't do that, Dana thought. She reached out a hand to rub her ear, and for a second time, for a long eternity, froze. Her faceplate was broken. Her helmet was useless. Ordering herself to remain calm, Dana began to examine Alex for injuries. Hampered by the dark and spacesuit, she found it a long, tiring, uninformative job. Just as she was about to succumb to tears of despair, Alex's recumbent form began to stir. With a mental shrug, Dana released the catch on the helmet and pulled it off. In an infinitely weary voice, Alex said, "The first step's a doozy." He was sitting up, somewhat weakly, but with returning vigor. Propping him up was a large machine that Dana had just decided was a metal-working lathe. "It looks like it's all the world like a tool shop," she observed. "The thing over there is obviously a bandsaw, and there's a sort of tool chest in the corner filled with whatnots. I can't find out what powers any of these things, though. No motors," she explained simply. "Well, if you can't tell me where we are, can you tell me where we aren't?" Alex replied. "We aren't on Pluto." "How do you know?" "Way too much," Alex responded with a sick grin. "I weigh too much, and so, I might add, do you. I'm not sure everything's intact." Cruelly, she chose to ignore his plaints. "Well, we're in a tool shop, and we got here falling up from Pluto, and I, for one, intend to go back." "You can't." By way of explanation, Alex mutely pointed to Dana's shattered helmet and poked a finger through his own tattered space gear. "Luckily, my searchlight works, though. Besides, I'd like to know what we're thinking of going back to. The ship's destroyed." With an effort, he controlled his voice. "No future back there. Besides, as near as I can remember, I came in through the floor, and it seems quite solid now." Carefully, Dana suggested, "They might not have returned to the ship yet." "So? They'll last on the unshipped supplies for a few weeks and then starve before they can be rescued. There's no utility ship available this time." "Alex, if the ship was bombed, in all probability the Admiral was responsible, and he'd make darn sure not to get back before the explosion. So the group of them are probably safe and well. And you can bet your bottom dollar the Admiral had all contingencies planned for. For the moment, though I don't want to be hard, I suggest we think about ourselves." After a pause, Alex looked her plainly in the eye. "You're right, of course," he said. He took a deep breath, raised his head, and examined their surroundings. They were in what appeared to be a large, even immense, sealed room. All around them, dusty machinery and loose tools filled the corners and covered shelving, just as they'd been left. By whom? The air seemed adequate, if slightly musty. Still, she wasn't about to complain. Thank God it was air that surrounded them, and not the vacuum of space. Well, to every room there must be a corresponding door, Dana suggested. Alex was less confident. Maybe, he replied. But the door we came in by seems to be shut, and no reason do we have to think there's another one. No, what we need to do is find out some sort of a cutting tool. Then we could dig our way out. Well, if you think you can find one in this mess, much less figure out how to use it, you're a genius. I've got an idea, though. With a smile just hiding behind her lips, Dana produced her ace in the hole. Why don't we follow those footprints? Triumphantly, she gestured to the far end of the room, where the dust and airborne sediment of eons had settled into a thick blanket. 4 abreast, leading into the dark, a column of tracks had scuffed and stirred the grime. The colonists! Alex shouted and leapt to his feet. Why didn't you point those out before? He demanded. I just noticed, Dana taunted back. Smiling broadly, Alex grabbed her by the waist and planted an enthusiastic kiss on her astonished face. Officer Drew, he intoned, you are to be commended on finding the first clue in this difficult case. Thank you, sir, Dana snapped back smartly. Enough of this shilly-shallying, Officer Drew. You know your duty. Do it. With a quick sigh of contentment, Dana broke her official pose, grabbed Alex by the hair, and kissed him soundly on the mouth. Then they both walked off to see where the mysterious tracks led. They were soon disappointed. Well, that's it then. The tracks seem to end right here, right in front of a blank wall. Alex groaned. In through the floor and out through the wall. Except that this wall isn't going to let us out, Dana observed. Might as well try. Open sesame. For all the good that will do us. I don't think they all went out that way, though. See back there where the tracks split off? Let's follow the loner. He may be our way out. He or it, Dana replied apprehensively. No, those prints look human enough to me. I'm sure we're on the track of the missing scientists. And if one of them is still here, we may be able to find out what happened. The old machinery creaked and rustled in the dark around them. The single set of tracks led on endlessly into the gloom. The footsteps wandered erratically, and Alex thought to himself that whoever had made them had probably been injured or suffered a concussion. He decided against mentioning that speculation to Dana. The thought that their only hope in this place might be disordered mentally or even dead would only worry her unnecessarily. Time would tell. Suddenly, Dana gasped, I think I see a light. In the distance, the blackness did seem somewhat paler. Very soon it was discernibly gray. The footsteps led up to an opening high in the wall and stopped. Alex began to wonder what lay on the other side of that wall. That's the end of chapter 4.